For centuries, the lands that now constitute the United States were inhabited by numerous indigenous peoples. Their civilizations had rich cultural traditions, advanced agricultural systems, and complex social structures. For instance, in the southwestern regions of what is now the U.S., the Hopi and Pueblo peoples thrived, while to the north, around the Great Lakes, lived the Iroquois Confederacy. Among their greatest achievements were stone and wooden structures, as well as intricate trade networks and communication systems between tribes. This all changed in the mid-15th century when Europeans, including the Spanish, Portuguese, French, and English, began exploring new lands for colonization. They first arrived on the American continent in search of new wealth and land to settle. Colonization and the struggle for independence. The first Europeans to reach what is now the U.S. were the Spanish, who established the first settlements in Florida, Texas, and California. However, the majority of early colonization history is tied to the English. In 1607, the English founded the first permanent settlement, Jamestown, in Virginia. Over the next several decades, the English established more colonies along the Atlantic coast, including Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, and others. Relations between the colonists and the British Empire gradually deteriorated due to heavy taxation and restrictions imposed by the Crown. In 1775, the American Revolution broke out, as 13 colonies began their struggle for self-determination and freedom. Leading the charge was George Washington, who would eventually become the first president of the U.S. After several years of fighting and military engagements, the United States officially gained independence in 1783 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. The Constitution and territorial expansion. After gaining independence, the newly formed United States faced the challenge of building a stable political and legal system. In 1787, the U.S. Constitution was adopted, establishing the principles for organizing the country and guaranteeing basic rights to citizens. The Constitution remains the foundational document of the U.S. to this day, though it has been amended numerous times. One of the key features of early U.S. history was territorial expansion. Beginning in 1803, the United States started aggressively expanding its borders through land purchases, wars, and settlement. For example, the Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the size of the country, and by the early 19th century, large-scale westward migration began, known as the Trail of Tears, which involved the forced relocation of Native Americans. The Civil War and Reconstruction. One of the most pivotal and tragic events in U.S. history was the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. This conflict was fought between the northern states, which opposed slavery, and the southern states, where slavery was a key economic institution. The war was a struggle for the future direction of the country, whether it would be a united nation with equal rights for all or a loose confederation of states with the right to maintain slavery. The war ended with a Northern victory, leading to the abolition of slavery and the restoration of the Union. After the war, the Reconstruction era began, a period during which the Southern states were reintegrated into the Union, and significant efforts were made to grant African Americans equal rights. This was a turbulent period marked by significant political, social, and racial challenges. Industrialization and stages of development. By the late 19th century, the United States had become one of the world's largest industrial powers. With inventions such as the telegraph, trains, and electric lighting, the economy grew rapidly. Cities filled with factories, and many people from rural areas moved to urban centers in search of work. At the same time, the U.S. began to play an increasingly significant role on the global stage. The country expanded its influence through colonial ventures and diplomatic initiatives, particularly in Latin America and the Pacific region. The 20th century, World Wars, the Great Depression, and civil rights. The 20th century was a period of dramatic change and challenges for the U.S. In World War I, 1914 to 1918, the United States played a crucial role as one of the Allies. In the 1920s, the U.S. experienced a period of economic prosperity, which was abruptly shattered by the Great Depression of 1929, a global economic crisis that hit the American economy hard. World War II, 1939 to 1945, marked another defining moment in U.S. history. The country joined the Allies to fight Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, emerging as a global superpower. After the war, the U.S. entered the Cold War era, a period of geopolitical tension between the U.S. and the Soviet Union that would shape international relations for decades. Concurrently, the U.S. faced its own internal struggles. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s fought for the equality of African Americans, led by figures such as Martin Luther King Jr. This period resulted in significant legal changes, including the end of racial segregation and the extension of voting rights to all citizens. Modern era. By the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the United States remained one of the world's largest economies, with the greatest military power and considerable cultural influence. The U.S. continued to play a major role in international affairs, engaging in military campaigns like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Domestically, the country faced challenges such as economic recessions, climate change, and debates over social justice. Today, the United States is a country with the world's largest GDP, a powerful military, and a dominant political and cultural influence. However, it still grapples with challenges such as political polarization, income inequality, and civil rights issues. The history of the U.S. is fascinating and filled with dramatic turns, shaping its modern identity as a nation that continues to evolve, seeking ways to improve society and adapt to the changing global landscape.